Good afternoon, everybody. I hope that you all enjoyed that delicious lunch. So thank you to the ESR team for that. We have two panels this afternoon, both entitled Listening to the Land, Non-Human Voices in the Ecozoic Era. We have three panelists for our first session: Reverend Steve Blackmer, Dr. Elizabeth McAnally, and David Kurtz. And I'd just like to, I am an ESR student, a first semester PhD, and someone asked earlier today, where else in the world are people having these discussions, and where else is this consciousness developing? And I've just moved here from South Africa, and I just wanted to point out that it is happening everywhere. There is a renewed awareness, and people are understanding more and more that environmentalism is about a lot more than practical ecology. It's a lot more about how we engage as human beings on a spiritual and emotional level with our environment. I would encourage you to reach out to your neighbors across continents and to communities outside of the Bay Area as well. Okay, so just to introduce our first speaker for the day, Reverend Steve Blackmer. I'm actually on the abstracts page. I'll just get to the... Apologies, I've just lost the bios.
I can introduce him. Steve was a superb graduate of the Forestry School, Forestry and Environmental Studies, as was Elizabeth. He spent more than 25 years in conservation work, forestry work, all through New England. The organizations are mentioned there. But we were delighted when Steve decided to come back to Yale, to the Divinity School and Forestry School, and he's one of these great folks who have done a joint degree in a way, and then went on to found this quite special Church of the Woods in New Hampshire, which has been a great attraction, and Harper Magazine wrote him up most recently. Take it away, Steve.
Thank you. I'd just like to say that that was almost entirely what was written on the page. So I won't say anything further.
Thank you. Thank you. Boy, what a treat it is to be here. So, Elizabeth, thank you for the invitation, and thank you all for being here. As Mary Evelyn said, I was a forester, conservationist, activist for 25 years, never had been to church in my life. Long story about how I got there, but I found my way into a church following this profound calling to be a priest. And first the call to be a priest, then I say, oh my goodness, that means I have to go to church. Happily, I found my way to Mary Evelyn and to other people at the Yale Divinity School who helped me understand how I might be able to do that as somebody who really wants to be outside and has spent most of my life and all of my professional life having to do with the outside. So in a nutshell, I want to tell you a little bit about that, about what's going on at Church of the Woods, what we do there, why I think it matters, and how we are one piece of this emerging network and work and activity that is going on far more widely, I think, than probably now, even now, any of us realize. Church of the Woods is a place where we view the land itself as the bearer of the sacred. We meet outside. We do now, because I'm from New Hampshire, it can be cold there. It will be about 0 this weekend. We do have a little barn after our first year where we can meet inside when we need to, and a wood stove in there to provide at least a modicum of heat. But the core of our spiritual practice is outdoors. It is there that we encounter the sacred. I'm speaking from the Christian tradition, which is the tradition that claimed me, because that's what happened rather than I finding it. But I think this is applicable in many ways. But that's the language I'm going to use, because it's the language I'm familiar with, I'm at home with. So what does it mean to encounter the sacred? What does it mean to engage with the sacred? Where do we find the sacred? I want to begin by hearkening to our sisters and brothers at Standing Rock, who made profound statements based on the sacredness of that land, drawing from the very depths of their traditions. Where do I, as somebody who's smack in the mainstream of Western civilization, the Western cultural tradition, where can I find the resources, find the language, find the practices to make that same claim, that the land is sacred, that the land is a bearer of the sacred, and that our responsibility, our opportunity is to interact with that, our responsibility is to care for that sacred. How can we do that from within the Western tradition, from within the heart of the tradition, the Christian tradition, that I have found myself in? That's what Church of the Woods fundamentally is about. It's how we do that, and how we build a spiritual community around that, through that, in that. But again, hearkening back to our sisters and brothers at Standing Rock, they have been able to articulate that effectively and publicly. In the mainstream Western tradition, we don't. We have lost that language, we have lost that ability. We therefore refer to everything in transactional terms. It's because the ecosystem will function better. True. Does it really? So what? It's because we need it. True. But is that sufficient? It's because it's worth more. Maybe, maybe not. Depends on which side of the equation you're on. But where can we appeal to something that is deeper than those transactional relationships? Where is there something where we can speak about inherent worth, inherent value, inherent sacredness? We can do that from within the Christian tradition, and we're experimenting with how to do that. So I want to speak about 3 simple practices that we engage with in doing this. The first is a contemplative practice, where the core, well, there are kind of 2 cores of what we do. The first core is going outside, just as the name of this panel is, and we listen to the earth. Where the sermon used to be, we go outside, and we just engage, usually for 20 or 30 minutes, with the natural world. We listen, we walk, we sit, whatever each of us individually is called to do. I give a very brief introduction, a micro homily, 2 or 3 minutes, giving people something to think about, some suggestions based on readings. And then we go outside and we simply immerse ourselves and experience the natural world in that. And we bring something back. We invite people to come back and bring with them a story, certainly a reflection, an experience, but also something tangible, something concrete, an acorn, a stone, a twig, a rock. Water's a little hard to carry, but sometimes snowballs. And we put those around the altar as part of the sacred offering of what the earth is offering back. In the Christian theology, the only thing we have to offer to God, which is a core of what the service, part of what the service is about, are those things we have in turn been given, those things we have received. There is nothing of our own making that we have not been given. So this is part of our offering back. These are things of the land that we are showing to be sacred, in that we're bringing them back and placing them around the altar. We create quite wonderful gatherings of these elements. When the weather's nice, we do this outside, and we have a stump where a tree used to be that we place things on and around. The land we gather on was logged very heavily about 10 years ago. So the part of this is simply a recovery of that piece of land, but in that very act of recovery, of ecological restoration, we're recognizing the sacred process of renewal. So that contemplative practice is a core thing of what we do, in that we are opening ourselves to being transformed. I want to go off on a slight tangent on this. All the way through my experience at Yale Divinity School, I was asking myself, what is different about working to save the earth from a religious and spiritual point of view than from a secular activist's point of view? The marches are the same, the lobbying is the same, the changing the light bulbs is the same, the whatever. Those practical actions are the same. What is different in a religious and a spiritual context is that I am being opened to being changed. I am being transformed. We are being transformed. A community is being transformed. I think that is what this practice opens us to. When I was reading for the very first time in Divinity School, reading the Bible, I say, oh, look at all these things that exist in here. Jesus went alone up the mountain to pray. Over and over and over again. The Bible says Jesus went alone into the wilderness. Jesus went into the desert. Jesus went to the lake. Jesus went to the sea. Often at night, always alone. The crowds would follow him. It's so clear that this is what he was doing. This was the core of his own spiritual practice. Why don't they teach this to us? Maybe here you guys do. I suspect you do. They don't. It needs to be taught that this is the core of the practice. So, contemplative practice. The second, communion. We eat the bread and wine, the body and blood of Christ, and we understand that in a fairly traditional way, that in that ritual, the entire sacred presence of the universe is encapsulated. It is held there, and we partake in that. We also partake in a communion with the fullness of creation around us. Those two are not different. They're the same thing, but they're expressed quite differently. We understand them as being the same thing. We experience this in a community of human beings. It is the same thing. So these three different levels of communion are going on simultaneously, with the sacred contained in the bread and wine, with the fullness of the natural world, and with each other. That practice of eating the sacred, of being in direct physical bodily communion. Somebody was speaking this morning, I'm afraid I've forgotten which of you, about the importance of body. This is a deeply embodied practice where we can do this. We actually take that body into our own body. We understand this scientifically, and that we are made, as Brian was saying this morning, of the body of the universe. The whole Journey of the Universe story expresses that. This is a way of understanding that in a microcosm. It's the same thing is going on. Then the third piece of it, we have contemplation, we have communion. The third piece is conservation. It is the going outward, the taking of this action out into the world. And that's where I want to transition to a little bit here. Again, you said earlier, you guys have said, there's something happening here. What it is, not exactly clear. It is spreading. 8 months ago, I thought I was the only outdoor wild church in the United States. 7 months ago, I found my friend Carmen Retzlaff, pastor of a Lutheran church, ELCA church, outside of Austin, Texas. And, oh, Carmen's doing this stuff too. How cool is that? Well, then I met my friend Victoria Lures, Church of the Wild in Ojai, California. And boom, 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 boom. We now have, 15, 14? 24 networks or communities of people forming around the United States and Canada that has emerged. We have been finding each other over this past 6 months. It's this mycelial network that is forming underground with these little popping up of different expressions of wild church. New Hampshire, Ontario, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Arkansas, Texas, Colorado, British Columbia, California. Those are ones I know. Maryland, that are some have formed, some are just forming. All of them are new. Within the last few years, all of them are new. All of them have this contemplative element engaged in them. The ritual expressions are quite different, but they're all doing the same thing. What's going on here? Something is happening. And I want to thank Victoria for this. And just stand up so people can see you. Come on. Victoria has been guiding the evolution of a network of these. We're calling the Wild Church Network, wildchurchnetwork.com. You can go there. It's real now because there's a website. And we are finding a way to form and support and encourage this expression of spirituality. Okay, I'm hearing that time's up. So I will end with that and say there's one more thing, that we are also looking to develop a network of practitioners, whether you're involved in a particular church like this or not. Mary Evelyn, what you and John have done over 20 years is build this this field of study. Now, I think it's time to go to the very bottom and start connecting us, the people who are doing it on the ground. So we are going to be, again, Victoria and I and others, looking at what we're calling a common ground network. People who are interested in this work, who are linked together, putting us in touch. So anybody who would like to be a part of that, to help us figure out what that is, let me know, let Victoria know, and thank you so much.